You're listening to the Culture Junkie podcast, where we go beyond the surface of pop culture.
I'm Keith.
And I'm Xandra. Together, we dive into the craft process and passion that drive today's creators. This is the Culture Junkie podcast. Life moves fast and your insurance should too. With on-the-fly insurance, you can compare rates, customize your coverage, and get a quote in minutes. It's 100% online, 100% secure, and 100% Canadian. So whether you're on the go or planning ahead, protect what matters most with ease. Head to ontheflyinsurance.com and get protection made easy. Built for life on the fly. Links in the bio or in the show notes below.
Hey, here we are with Chris Ford. Chris Ford is the founder of Tap2Tag. Chris has been a creator of sorts for quite some time, and I want him to tell his story. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar, Chris, what is Tap2Tag and how did you get started?
Wow. Tap2Tag is, in essence, a way in which people can communicate with each other in three different sectors. Effectively, we've harnessed technology called near-field communication, or NFC. I think more people know about it these days. It's that little bit of technology in mobile phones that allows you to tap a phone against a terminal and pay for stuff. We've just used it in a different way. Tap2Tag as an entity looked at recreating the procedures of how certain devices, spans or cards or whatever, they're all embedded with a RFID chip, one of these tiny little tag things. And then it could be linked to different sorts of profiles. So the first thing we looked at was the medical field and tried to find a way in which we could use that technology to provide immediate access to a patient's medical information when they're in trouble. And we started that process, I think, 14 years ago and launched it 12 years ago.
Was there a specific moment when you thought this needs to exist? This product needs to be made?
The initial requirement was actually for my 87-year-old mother. And if anybody has got elderly relatives, you'll probably find out that their medication is changing all the time. Their medical needs are changing all the time. I think as we get older in life, our reliance on the medical profession increases dramatically. There was nothing on the market where we could give her something that contained all her medical information. You've probably seen these little necklaces that you can put a tiny bit of paper in, and then you've got a scratch bang, all the medication. Of course, my mother was on a myriad of different medications. So we'd have to be changing that all the time. Trying to solve problems is one of the things I like to do. And having recently been introduced to this thing called near-field communication, came up with a plan to try and create the software that would enable us to store that information for my mother and just give her something so it was ready in case of an emergency.
Well, that's quite a journey where you started from where you are to where we are now. I mean, when you launched Tap2Tag, did you imagine it would become what it is today?
The day it went live, I sat there looking at a computer screen, waiting for hours and hours and hours until 3 a.m, thinking, why hasn't anybody found it? And that's when I realized that marketing and awareness were probably the key things that I'd missed out from the equation. I think one of the important lessons I've learned, I'm very grateful to have been able to take a nugget of an idea and then run with it, evolve it, nurture it, and see it blossom into what it is today. It is the most preeminent medical alert system in the world, and what we've been doing with it now is just phenomenal. It's so secure, it's so user-friendly, and its capabilities are astonishing.
It's evolved quite a bit. You mentioned there's different use cases now. There's a Tap2Tag for pets. There's a business aspect to it. But yeah, which one came out of nowhere?
Oh, that's a good question. One of the challenges, I guess, is I'm always thinking of the problems to solve. And sometimes I feel as though everybody else hasn't thought of the problem, which this provides the solution to. Where I think we came out of left field was probably about 5 or 6 years ago when we were approached by one of the hospitals here in the UK who wanted to use it for a specific need for looking at their patients within their pediatric department. And At the time, it served a purpose, but over the last 2 years, 3 years, with the software developments that we've done, it's completely rewritten to a stage where we can now incorporate the medical information held by organizations like hospitals or doctors' surgeries. So the impact of all of that is that we now have the baseline for universal electronic medical system, which everybody can access with the right level of security and controls. So that's always been the mainstay of where we've been trying to work from, that secure level base point.
Well, you mentioned impact, and so you've gone from zero to an electronic health record, with that use case. So what are some of the most impactful use cases you've seen? Is there anything that stands out?
I love getting stories from customers and clients who relay how the medical profession, especially emergency personnel, have interacted with it. There was one situation where a paramedic was looking at the medical profile of a patient who collapsed in a shop, and the patient was all right, nothing wrong, but he was allergic to various types of drug that they were just about to give him. But they were taking him off to the ambulance and taking the shop owner's mobile phone with them into the ambulance. And he said, well, you've got my mobile phone. And they said, well, all the information is here on the phone. They said, yeah, but all you have to do is take your phone and tap it against the wristband and that information will appear. And it was just like an explosion of, wow, didn't realize it
Eureka.
could do that. Eureka.
Yeah. There's been a lot of eureka moments with Tap2Tag.
Yeah, the way it's changed lives, the most impactful one, I think, which it doesn't sound particularly earth-shattering, but a young girl, I say young, in her 20s, wrote to me to tell me exactly how her wristband had changed her life, having been diagnosed with epilepsy. And she described her life as becoming ever more wrapped in cotton wool. But she was still living at home with her parents, and her parents were terrified of her going out because she'd had another seizure. An epileptic seizure can represent in various different ways, but in a severe case, it just looks as though you might have had too much to drink, or it might look just odd to other people. So in her instance, her world started shrinking. She didn't want to go out just in case she had a seizure. She wouldn't know how people would react. Parents were worried about her going out for that very same reason. And because she was a young girl, her social life diminished, and the friends she thought she had started walking away.
Dear.
And she came across the wristband, and her life changed, as she described it, because she felt more confident about going out because they knew that her medical information was there. Parents knew that if anybody scanned it, they'd be alerted. And the final part of her message was that she was sat on a train going to see an old school friend she hadn't seen for 10 years, and she couldn't have done that without her Tap2Tag wristband.
So you've created a security blanket for an entire group of people. You allow them to get out and live their lives as they would, or as we all would, because they have the peace of mind, of the Tap2Tag device on their wrist or around their neck or wherever they're keeping it.
The peace of mind is the three words that keeps coming back. It's the way in which people can change their mentality about how they interact with the world now. They are confident that that information is available. Somebody mentioned to me, oddly enough, just today, well, what about those phones? You can keep your medical information on your phone. First of all, young children, but particularly elderly people, don't necessarily have smartphones. And the disconnect between where there is information in a hospital or a doctor's surgery or wherever and the individual, there is no bridging of that gap. Tap2Tag does that. It breaches the gap between wherever that data and that information is held to providing it to the right people at the right time.
So Tap2Tag is an information hub, is really what you've created using the NFC technology.
I'm glad you said that, not me. But yes, it is. It's a secure way of allowing people to control their information and share it whenever and with whomever they choose.
This is the interesting part to me because Tap2Tag, you've said, is an industry leader, but I know there's kind of a lack of recognition. It's an industry leader in NFC and digital identity solutions for business, for medical, and it's still not a household name. Why do you think that is?
Because I'm rubbish at marketing. uh, I really don't know the answer to that. I think I've mentioned to other people before now, what is it? How does something get triggered? How does something get launched into the stratosphere? What we're working on now is we're working with health innovation groups, particularly in the UK, to help spread the word. And once we can start to get adoption of the system within the NHS, and don't forget, there is nothing like this within the NHS, and there's nothing like it worldwide.
Mm.
Everybody's struggling trying to integrate their data with one another, even within the same organization. Potentially, we have got the hub that can do that.
Is it a challenge of education? Is it marketing, or is it simply being ahead of the curve? I know you've been at it for over 10 years, so I can only imagine how leading edge it was then. But still, do you think you're still ahead of its time 10 years later?
Most definitely. I think the challenge we had initially was introducing the near field communication technology into a marketplace that didn't understand what that was. And as contactless payment came along, I don't think people still realize that that's what phones do. Our system doesn't just work with NFC, it works with QR codes, it works with just simple access to the internet in other ways. And maybe the COVID pandemic probably helped with people recognizing what a QR code was.
Hmm.
Even back then, that was 5 years, 6 years after we'd started the process. So what we're really looking for is an opportunity of demonstrating how this system works in a real life situation. And in some ways, I think people, the amount of times you can tap a phone against one of the devices and the profiles of the individual just appear. And people will always say, well, how does that work? And to be honest, then and even now, the answer is it's magic. Just trust us, it's magic. And maybe that's the answer.
Well, maybe that is the answer, but I mean, you've gone from being a local company in Bristol, you've gone countrywide, and now I know Tap2Tag is worldwide. And still, what's been the hardest part about raising the profile with all of this potential exposure?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I think we're at that point where we've created something which it's a bit like, we've created the car that runs on water. How do we tell people about it? People wouldn't believe it. And so we've got to find a way through doing podcasts like this, of trying to reach out to a wider audience, just to explain what it does. If it changes people's lives and gives people security in what they do, that's got to be a good thing. And we're living in a very, very odd world now.
Very much so. And every founder, such as yourself, faces obstacles. What were some of the toughest moments while building this product?
The toughest moments. I think I've been pretty upbeat about the development cycle, always trying to cut off corners, not cut corners, but cut off the corners where you think you might end up with a roadblock. So trying to steer things around the development process in that way. One of the biggest challenges may be appearing on Dragon's Den or Shark Tank as it is over there, wondering what they were going to say. But the one place I do feel confident is actually speaking to medical professionals about the whole process. And I've given talks in front of 6 people or 106 people. And everybody, once you got those opportunities, it does seem to pay off. People do get it. People working in the medical profession particularly know exactly how beneficial this kind of information is. The problem is then how do you then get those people to become decision makers and try and move it on through whichever organization you're dealing with.
Well, that being said, was there a point where you had to completely rethink the direction of the company, just to increase the uptake?
I would say probably about 2.5 years ago. So don't forget that's at a time when we were sort of 10 years into the cycle. The original software that the product, the software was written on was really creaking at the seams. There's no amount of oil that we could pour on it would try and loosen things up, mainly because we had bolted on so many different innovations over the years. If you start sticking things onto a body and it starts growing and becomes top heavy, that's exactly what was happening with the system.
Hmm.
So the choice we had probably 2.5 years ago is, well, do we just let the whole thing slide and let that car that runs on water just slip away into the scrap heap, or do we completely reevaluate how the system would work? So that's what we did. We put some more money into it, redeveloped it from the ground up. That enabled us to build on a lot of other bits and pieces that we were hoping to achieve with the old system, such as having what we call organizational elements. So it allows employers to maintain the medical records of their employees. It allows schools to keep a medical history of their children. So I think that was really, there was a sea change in what we could do 2.5 years ago. Or we could definitely go from one road or another. And I think it's become a personal baby, if you like, to try and deliver
Yeah,
this to the public.
I can tell. Yeah, so do you ever feel like you're trying to convince people of something they don't understand?
I think in the initial stages, people would say something like, that's pretty cool, but could it do this?
Very
And
much.
I always got the feeling, so, well, if you were so good at it, why didn't you think of the first thing first to develop the second thing that you now want it to do? Work with it. The idea was work with us and we'll see what we can do. But of course, everybody just likes, that's very cool. And I think until people can find a use case in their own life where they could, like me with my 87-year-old mother, how do they appreciate how this thing works when other things don't?
Right. So, okay, so we're in a booming age for technology right now. Where do you think the smart identity technology is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years? People are very wary of being tracked and identified. And I know Tap to Tag has always been very careful with the way they curate the data. I know the data belongs to the end user. But so how do you see Tap to Tag fitting into the future of technology and, with this AI integration that's coming and all of these kind of things?
I think we're wary, but also optimistic. Go figure. We'll try and try and walk the balance beam between the two. Using the as you quite rightly said, we have got no ownership of the information that is held and prepared by the patients, particularly with medical information. We actually overtly state this in our privacy agreement. We have no access to or can do anything with the data that patients and customers actually store on our system. It will go nowhere other than within our environment. The AI opportunity is interesting. There's opportunities for the data that customers hold to introduce AI in an environment that could be a benefit to the end user. But the key there is got to be by choice from the person that owns the data in the first place. So any advances down that particular route will need to be navigated very carefully.
Do you think we're moving towards a world where even physical objects will have a digital identity, and would Tap to Tag play a role in that kind of thing?
In saying a digital identity, I mean, our devices are digital by their very nature. It's where that takes us. I don't know the answer to that.
I was thinking along the lines of brand identification and, security, because NFC does have a secure aspect of it. And, with two-factor authentication, there are opportunities in that world to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. So do you see an aspect of that?
I do, but I think there's a wider point here. I think you've got very large organizations out there that are your Metas, your Googles, your Apples, and Microsofts, and all the rest of it, all investing heavily in things like AI. I'll come back to the point in a second, but I think there is enormous distrust now for the public with organizations like that. So how do we engender trust with the public when we're holding on to their information? And I think that is one of the things we've certainly got to overcome moving forward.
So what have you personally learned from building Tap to Tag?
Don't do it again. It's hard. I've talked about having the benefit of taking a nugget of an idea and developing it and bring it to fruition, literally almost almost like bringing up another child. Maybe that's where there's a very good analogy there. You know, you've got a child that is waiting to spring from the nest to move on to the next level in its evolution.
Hmm.
And that's where we're at with Tap2Tag now. It only needs one catalyst, one thing, and it will ping off all over the world.
Well, if you could go back and give your younger self, your founder self, some advice, what would that be? Good question, eh?
Keep at it. Which, yeah, I've always been one for coming up with ideas, and there's still I've got bubbling away in the background, but there are a number of ideas that I came up with 15, 20 years ago, which have then come into evolution 5, 10 years later. Never had the opportunity to develop those initial ideas in the first place.
So,
But now this is one that I think has still got an awful lot of legs to run and is going to be something that, as long as it keeps saving and changing people's lives, then it's something we'll continue to do.
so what excites you most about the next chapter of the company?
I think the discussions we're now having with organizations within the NHS that have got the wherewithal to see that this is a real benefit to clinicians, emergency personnel, and to patients. So I've always been had that strong belief, and now I'm starting to get people within the NHS to understand how that can work within their environment. So I think that is certainly the next challenge, but it's actually quite exciting because it gives an opportunity to demonstrate to the people that will really know their onions as far as how technology works and how it should and could be working within a medical environment.
Well, for people hearing about Tap2Tag for the first time today, what's the one thing you want them to remember about the company?
Ethically bound, morals always pointing north, security is our byword, and we just want to make sure that we can help change people's lives for the better.
So you like to say you've got life-changing technology on tap.
I have to write that down.
You should write that down. Chris, thank you so much for coming on today, telling us about Tap2Tag. It's brilliant technology. The word needs to get out, and we're doing everything we can to help. Anyway, we'll talk to you soon.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks, Heath.